Thanks for joining us, folks. We'll be starting just a few minutes after noon.
Hi, this is Rick.
Hey, Rick, thanks for joining us.
So are we, it says that, I'm totally fine with that we are not on video here.
You don't have to be on video. No, that's fine.
Right, okay, good. Because I don't want to like be dribbling food all over my face.
That's okay. As long as you're around to answer questions, especially the technical ones, that's what we're concerned about. So thanks.
For those of you just joining, we're going to be starting in just a few minutes. All right, we are going to get started. Thank you all for joining us for this Lunch and Learn webinar today. My name is Justice, and I am the Community Outreach Intern with MadiSUN. In just a moment, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Sam Deniski, who will be leading this presentation. The presentation will be about 30 minutes and will feature two of our installers, Midwest Solar and Full Spectrum Solar. Then we'll leave time at the end for an open question session. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, though, feel free to put them in the chat, use the Q&A function or the raise hand function, which should all be options on the menu bar. We are recording this and it will be posted to our events page if you wish to rewatch or share any portion of it. And with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Sam.
Thanks, Justice, and thanks everyone for joining us today at this Lunch and Learn. We're going to be talking about our Solar for Home program. As Justice pointed out, my name is Sam Deniski. I am the Distributed Resources Director here at Renew Wisconsin. Renew is a statewide renewable energy policy and advocacy organization. We do statewide work for solar, wind, electric vehicles, hydropower, geothermal, you name it. So really excited to have you all here today. Also very excited to let you know that this webinar will also have a few co-hosts. We thankfully have Kelly Hilliard with the City of Middleton. She's going to be on in a few moments to talk about some of the things that the City of Middleton is doing, especially on the renewable energy front. We also have Jason McDuff from Green Penny Bank. He's going to be on a little bit later in the presentation to talk about financing and some of the options there through Green Penny. And we also have a couple of solar installer representatives as well from Full Spectrum Solar and from Midwest Solar. So really want to thank everyone, all of my co-hosts and all of my guests for being here today. But let's talk about solar. I always start out with this slide because I should say this photo in the middle here, that is a photo of my parents' solar array up in northern Minnesota. And I always start with this because I say, you know, if solar can work in northern Minnesota, it can work just about everywhere. So I definitely really want to stress that, you know, solar has made some big strides lately, and it really is available for just about anyone. And we're going to talk more and more about that as the presentation goes along. But I first want to talk about the benefits of joining a group buy. So this MadiSUN is the city's group buy program. Thankfully, this year we were able to get some assistance as well from the county in order to take the group buy countywide. So now it is officially open for anyone in Dane County. So you don't have to just live in the city of Madison to be able to take advantage of that. But the group buy helps simplify the process. We try to make things as easy for the homeowner as possible. So we select the contractors. We only select reputable solar installers that are experienced, that know all the permits and the codes and things like that. We also get everyone together at one point, or we also collect all the folks together to try to bring the cost down through bulk purchasing and things like that. And then we also provide support, education, consultation, things like today's webinar to not only help educate folks in general about solar, but also specifically educating them throughout the solar buying process. Again, we try to make it really easy, and hopefully that is what we'll do today. So just want to lay out a little bit of an agenda here. We're going to first talk about how solar works, some of the technology, some of the, a little bit of the policies as well. We're going to talk about why installing solar made sense in the states, even a northern state, like Wisconsin. We're going to talk a little bit about solar economics and incentives. We have a cost exercise we're going to walk through, which hopefully should give you a really good idea of how much your solar array may cost. And we're also going to talk about some of the next steps as well, what you actually have to go through in order to get the system installed on your home. So that's our agenda, but before I get too much into it, I want to hand it over to Kelly Hilliard from the City of Middleton. Kelly, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your exact role right now, but Kelly works with the city to implement sustainability measures and also renewable energy with the City of Middleton as well. So Kelly, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Sam. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator at the City of Middleton. And I just really want to thank MadiSUN program for expanding this program for all of Dane County. This is really important for the City of Middleton, and we're all really excited about this. We have both citywide and also community-wide renewable energy goals, like a lot of other Dane County cities. And what kickstarted that was we put out a city ballot referendum in 2016 to gauge interest and support from our community about mitigating climate change and going 100% renewable. And back then we had an 81% mandate from residents that supported that the city pursue policies to mitigate climate change. And that really leapfrogged into creating a strong renewable energy resolution, which was adopted by the city in 2018. So it includes goals for the city to meet 100% of our city energy operations, which would include fleet and buildings and all of our energy use, make it 100% renewable by 2040. But we also put into the resolution that we wanted to make a goal to meet 80% of community-wide energy needs by 2040 and 100% by 2050. And that's a heavy lift for the community. And so we want to make it as easy as possible and provide as many resources as possible. And this program is one way that I think will provide some great resources and make things streamlined and easier for residents to go solar as well. And that will play into meeting our 100% community goals. So please feel free to reach out to me at the City of Middleton if you have any questions as you move through this process, if you're from Middleton. And we really look forward to working with other Dane County communities and Renew and MadiSUN. So thanks, I'll pass it back to Sam.
Thanks, Kelly. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate all the work and help with outreach that that you and the City of Middleton have done as well, and just all the renewable energy itself that you've implemented too. It's really great. If you have any questions for Kelly, please feel free to put them in the chat. And as Justice pointed out, you can kind of do that at any point here throughout the conversation. We'll try to answer those either as they come up or at the end of the presentation. So I just want to start everyone off with a little kind of introduction into the technology as to how solar works. We all might be starting out at different points in the process. We all might have, we'll likely have different levels of knowledge. So I just want to kind of talk on a very high level about how solar works. So it's a, it has gained a lot in popularity, certainly over the last 5 to 10 years or so, but solar itself is actually kind of an older technology. It's been around for many, many decades, but it's actually a pretty simple process. A lot of people assume, given the fact that a lot of the strides have been made in the last few years, that it's really complicated technology. Certainly some of the engineering is definitely complicated, but in terms of the components that go into a solar system, there's actually not a lot to it. So the two main components, of course, are the solar modules or the solar panels and the inverters. The inverter can take a few different forms. It can look like this, which is essentially about the same size as your electric panel in your home. It can also take the form of microinverters, which are kind of smaller inverters, as you might imagine, that are either attached or very close to each individual solar panel as well. They both work pretty much the same way, and that is they convert the DC electricity, which is what solar panels make, into AC electricity, or alternating current, direct current to alternating current. And the reason why we have to convert it to alternating current is because that is typically what all of our electronics and our appliances use in our home. So that's what the inverter does. It kind of does the behind the scenes work. It also can connect to monitoring equipment. So if you're interested in monitoring your system, figuring out how much energy your system is making at any given time, that's what the inverter does. And there's some great programs out there that help you do that now. There are smartphone apps, there are websites and things like that where you can go and figure out, not only how much your system is making, even on a cloudy day like today, but also how much, your home might be consuming as well. So they really, there are definitely a lot of options out there for those of us who are tech savvy and also maybe kind of want to nerd out and geek out on some of those sorts of things. The other component, of course, is the solar module or the solar panel. This is typically the sort of the forward-facing part of the solar project. The solar panels convert the sunlight into electricity at direct current, as I pointed out earlier. It's a chemical reaction, which means there's really no moving parts. There's no working components, which is great for a few reasons. It means very little maintenance. There's nothing really to break down. There's no, gears or anything like that to replace. That's why solar has become so popular. It requires very little maintenance. It also enables those panels to last for a long time. So there's a 25-year warranty on all of the panels that are used by our 3 different solar contractors. So those panels should last at least that long, if not longer, maybe even 30 or 40 years. And again, there's not a lot of maintenance required. The panels have a degradation value of less than 1%. So even 20 years down the road, those solar panels are still going to be very useful, still going to make 90% or more of the electricity that they did when they first started. So really simple process. They're typically about the size of a door. There's 2 main sizes to each panel. There's one panel that is 72 cells, and the solar cells are those small little squares you see within the panel. So there's one panel that is 72 cells, and then there's one panel that is 60 cells. For the most part, though, everything works the same. It's just the footprint of the panel is a slightly different size. So if you can imagine, putting 11, 12, 15 panels or 15 door-sized pieces of solar on your roof, that's typically what you kind of look at. But every solar array is a little different. So and we'll talk about that too in a minute here too. So this is how they work in tandem. Typically, when we're talking about solar projects, especially residential projects, we're talking about a grid-tied solar array. So you're still connected to the grid, which is actually a really good thing. If the power goes out, unfortunately, you will lose power. But during times where the sun is not producing electricity to offset your needs, you'll still be able to take in electricity off the grid. So how the solar array works is the sun, of course, hits your panels. Those panels have electrons in them that get excited, which then flow down into your circuit box. From there, they go through your electric meter. First they go to the inverter, where that is converted from DC electricity to AC electricity. From that point, it goes through your circuit box and then into your home, powers your lights, your TVs, your appliances, things like that. Many times, especially in the middle of the day here, assuming we're not socked in with clouds, you will produce actually more electricity than what you need. At that point, the electricity will flow through your meter and out onto the grid. It will go down to your neighbor, your neighbor's neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. And your meter will actually, in effect, dial backwards. And what happens then is you get a credit for that. It's called net metering. We're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. So the excess power flows out onto the grid. And then, like I said, at night or during really cloudy days, when you're using more electricity than what your panels are producing, you'll be able to pull in electricity off the grid as well. So relatively simple process. Of course, we can get into the weeds pretty quick with things like net metering and such, but that in essence is how solar works. And net metering, this is just a fun little animation here to kind of explain how that works. Essentially what net metering, or you might have heard of it as net energy billing, is banking credits or accumulating credits for the excess electricity that you put onto the grid. So your meter, you'll get a new meter most likely, which will be a digital meter that will keep track of the kilowatt hours that you produce. And then, like I said, at night or on cloudy days, when you have to pull energy in off the grid, your meter will flow back forward like it typically does now. And then at the end of the month or the billing period, you will just pay the net of that meter. So it's really great to be able to take that excess energy that you produce, during sunny periods, sunny peaks, and be able to use that during off-peak hours or non-sunny hours, I should say. A lot of people assume that, when you do solar, you're going to be off-grid. That certainly is an option, but it's not as simple an option as I think a lot of people think. If you go off-grid, you have to purchase large battery backup systems. You also have to think about how you structure your day when you do things like laundry or dishes or things like that. And it really involves some major lifestyle changes, which is why typically we actually just suggest that folks do a grid-tied array. It really works well, especially with net metering, to sort of provide for you sort of a virtual battery for certain utilities as well, especially for most of us who are on Madison Gas and Electric. Not only can you bank those credits from daytime to nighttime, but you can also bank it from day to day and even from month to month, which is really great in an area like Wisconsin, where we typically get a lot more sunshine, certainly more sunny hours in the summer than we do in the winter. So not only, if you're on Madison Gas and Electric, not only can you bank that energy from day to day, but you can actually bank it from month to month. I like to kind of use the analogy, which is now very dated, of rollover minutes on a cell phone. For those of you that remember those days, it's kind of like rolling over your electricity from month to month. So that's how net metering works. That's how a grid-tied solar array works. Oh, this is also maybe a better visual representation of how net metering works. So this represents the graph of a real homeowner's electricity consumption and production in real time throughout the course of a given day. So the area in red is where this person's home is consuming electricity or using electricity. The area in green is where that person's solar array is producing electricity. And the area in blue is the overlap area. It's where that solar energy is being used in real time. So as you can see, the area in blue, actually pretty small in comparison to the areas shaded in red or in green, which is a really even better maybe representation of why net metering is such a good policy, because essentially what we're able to do here is we're able to take this area in green and kind of essentially shove it in virtually, or at least in terms of your bill, into those areas in red. The other thing that's important to point out is, as you can see, consumption, this person's consumption, and this goes for a lot of homes actually, spikes, it ebbs and flows throughout the day, whereas the solar production is actually really steady, really even, which is another reason why it's great to be able to take those electrons that you overproduce and that the utility gives you credit for, to use at another time. So this is a really good representation of why net metering is so important, not just from a technical standpoint, but also from a billing standpoint as well. So that's how net metering works. Also want to talk a little bit when we talk about how solar performs and how it works, what makes for a good home. Typically, the first thing that we look at when assessing a homeowner's needs, or a homeowner's solar potential, I should say, is their roof and if it is shaded or not. If you have trees or other buildings that are blocking your view of the sun, that's certainly going to reduce the amount of electricity that you're going to be able to make, and the amount of electricity that you're going to be able to offset too. So if you have a shaded roof, if it's extremely shaded, we can walk through some other options for you, but this is the first thing that we look at. The second thing that we look at is the age of your roof. Ideally, you want to be able to install solar on as new of a roof as possible. The reason for that is kind of going back to the warranties that are on these panels. You know, these systems will last for a long time, like I said, 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, which is as long, if not longer, than a typical shingle roof. So we want, we want that roof to be as new as possible when you install, because if you have to re-roof your home in the middle of your project, that is going to eat into your return on investment cost. You're going to have someone come and disassemble that system, detach those panels, re-roof, and then reconnect and reestablish everything. So ideally, you want to go in with as new of a roof as possible. If you have a metal roof, that's even better. Your roof doesn't necessarily have to be new. And it is really easy to attach the panels to a metal roof as well. So the metal roof is kind of the one instance where we don't really worry too much about the roof's age. Ideally, you want a south-facing roof. In fact, this actually was the number one thing that we looked at, even as little as 3 or 4 years ago. Now, shading is much more important. Again, if you have a south-facing roof, that is best. But thanks to things like net metering and increases in panel efficiency and technology, east and west facing rooftops now are totally fine as well, especially if you don't have any shading. So really great news there. It has opened up the market to a lot more homeowners. And then the last thing that we look at isn't necessarily related to your rooftop, of course, but it's about your efficiency. It's about how you use electricity in your home. If you have old appliances and things like that, that will cause you or create you to need a larger solar array. So if you have, older refrigerators, other things like that, energy efficiency measures that you can take to reduce your electricity, that's best. We always say that the cheapest kilowatt hour is the one you never have to make in the first place. So think about your energy efficiency needs at home. And if you need to make those upgrades, again, this is more on the electric side as opposed to the heating side. So we're not necessarily talking about insulation and things like that. But if you have energy efficiency upgrades on the electric side, you also want to make those first as well. So that essentially wraps up the how solar works portion of the talk. I do have two of our solar installers on, Nick and Rick. That was not planned. Their names just happened to run.
It's actually Chad on here. I used Nick's invite somehow. This is actually
I see Chad. Well, you just ruined that joke for me, but that's okay. We have Rick and Chad on. Rick is from Midwest Solar. Chad is from Full Spectrum Solar. I'm going to give them the opportunity to kind of correct any errors that I may have made. while I grab a quick drink. So Rick and Chad, if you have anything to add or anything that you need to correct that I said, please go ahead and do that now.
I would say most of that sounded pretty good to me. I don't know, Rick, do you have any input on that?
No, I don't. I mean, the only thing I would sort of add a little bit is that there's no such thing as well, I guess I should qualify that. I mean, sometimes people say, is my house good for solar? And I think that the only way you can really know is you have to look at, the complexity of the installation, as well as issues like shading and the roof pitch and the azimuth. But ultimately, a lot of it comes down to what's your objective. And if your objective is that you want to offset, the energy usage for your home, a system that you choose might not have as fast of a payback as, say, another house, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong for you. I mean, it's your decision ultimately. So, I mean, that's one of the points of the program, is to kind of get you that information, and ultimately you decide. I mean, for example, I'm into solar, so I put solar on my house. I have about 25-30% shading, but I really enjoy offsetting my utility usage. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rick. You don't have to have a completely unshaded or clear rooftop in order to go solar. It certainly helps a lot. Some people, as Rick pointed out, they're more interested in being more self-reliant, or maybe being more environmentally friendly. Some people are just about, this is a home project that's going to save them money. And whatever decision you use to go solar, it is great. And we don't care at Renew and within our industry. So it definitely is. There are multiple options out there. But yeah, Rick makes a great point. You don't have to have a completely ideal situation just to go solar. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about some other reasons right now about why to go solar. And we're on cost, so why don't we talk about that first? Solar has become much more affordable over the past decade or so. This graph represents sort of the cost curve that solar has taken over the last 10 years. I do want to point out that the cost curve, which is in yellow, represents all solar. So you might be looking at that 2020 price as being just a little over $1 a watt and getting really excited. I just want to point out that this is all solar. So this is residential solar, commercial solar, community solar, and utilities solar as well. So that price is going to get skewed a little bit because of the lower cost per watt value of, say, a utility scale installation. However, even in the residential market, costs have dropped by around 75% in the last decade. It has really opened up to market to a lot more homeowners and allowed a lot more homeowners to take part in the clean energy revolution. A lot of the reason for this decline in costs has been because of the other part of this graph, which is the blue bars. Those blue bars indicate how much solar we have installed as a country over the last decade. So as you can see, thanks to economies of scale, also thanks to technology increases as well, that cost curve has been able to come down. So as we install more solar, that price becomes lower and lower. And that's why we're kind of in the position today where when we talk about solar with homeowners, it's an economic conversation usually that we're making. So costs have come down quite a lot, still not free, of course, but definitely some big strides have been made there. Solar also super reliable. I think a lot of people see photos of panels, assume it's a thin pane of glass, assume that, especially in part of the country like Wisconsin, that it's not very reliable. As you saw from that net metering image I showed you earlier, solar is very reliable. Sun comes up every day and it sets every day, but the panels themselves can withstand a lot. As you can see from this fun image here, can withstand some pretty large hail, can also withstand really strong winds, up to hurricane force winds. The other kind of weather component that we like to talk about, especially when it comes to reliability, is snow. And I will be the first to tell you, if we get snow, and it falls on the panels, those panels are not going to produce electricity. The good news is, because they're mounted at an angle on your roof, because they're a darker, kind of a black or a navy blue color, that snow will almost always, the snow that's on your panels, I should say, will always melt and slide off of those panels much faster than they will off the rest of your roof or off of, even your sidewalk or some other things like that. So if we do get especially a heavy snowfall, especially a snowfall that's followed by a cold snap, your panels are not going to produce electricity. We kind of advise against trying to remove that snow. You might damage the panels, you might void the warranty. It's also really dangerous to get up on a roof and try to wipe snow off of those panels. So, typically, even if we get a decent snowfall, within a few days, that snow will melt and slide off your roof, and then you'll be back to producing electricity just like you were before. Another reason why it's really great to install solar, jobs. These are professions, these are jobs that cannot be outsourced. We need real folks like Chad and Rick installing these systems. We need boots on the ground doing it. And I'm happy to say that all three of the installers that are building systems in our program are based here in Madison. So all of the folks that will be installing systems are likely your neighbors or live pretty close to you. So this is another really good reason why solar is great, because we can really contribute to our local economy. Speaking of more fun areas in the financial realm of this, solar increases the value of your home. So this was a study done from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is located in Colorado. So this is a study from Colorado Homes, so not, in fairness, not a study done in Wisconsin. But what that study and what other studies similar to that have shown is that homes outfitted with solar typically sell faster and for more money than an equivalent home in a subdivision. So essentially what that means is, let's say you and your neighbor who has relatively the same size house, the same age house as you, your home has solar on it, your neighbor's does not. When you go to sell, your home is likely to sell faster and for more money than your neighbor's. And the reason for that is, pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. If you're a prospective homeowner and you're looking, maybe in that neighborhood or at that price range, let's assume one house has, $150 per month utility bill, and the other one has a $10 or a $20 per month electric bill. That is definitely going to be much more attractive to potential home buyers than a home without solar. And again, because there's very little upkeep or maintenance required, it just sort of adds to that value. So really important. If you're not going to be in your home necessarily for 20, 30, or 40 years, you can still reap some of the benefits of having solar installed on your home. So that kind of brings us to the end of the why installing solar is good section. I'm going to move on now to the part that I think we're all interested in, and that's the economics and the incentives. I talked a little bit before about the cost curve. Again, solar certainly still is not free, but we're going to talk a little bit about some of the incentives that might be available for you. The first one we're going to talk about is an incentive from the Focus on Energy program. If you're not familiar with this program, I definitely encourage you, when this webinar is done, to Google Focus on Energy. They have dozens and dozens of efficiency programs out there, rebates, other things like that, that can really help reduce your electric bill and put some more money back in your pocket. The main way that we relate to Focus on Energy is there is a rebate for solar power through the Focus on Energy program. Is through their renewable program. And that rebate rather for homeowners is a $500 rebate. It's just a flat rebate. So if you meet the Focus criteria, and that is your rooftop, has to face within 90 degrees of due south, which means it can face either due west all the way down to due south and then back to due east. Basically anywhere other than facing some direction close to north. You also have to be less than 10% shaded as well. So there are some criteria to qualify for that rebate. But if you do, there is some potential money there. There's also a larger rebate for rural residences. I'm not sure where all the folks on this webinar are from, but I think Justice, I think you have access to those zip codes, and you can put them in the chat, and you folks can check that and see if you qualify for those. The other big incentive that we like to talk about is, you've probably heard about it, is the federal investment tax credit. So this is a tax credit or a tax rebate essentially that you will get from the federal government, which is good this year and next year, for 26% of the total cost of your array. It used to be at 30%. Back in 2019, it was at 30%. It got reduced last year. It was actually scheduled to get reduced further this year. Thankfully, at the end of last year, in December of 2020, those tax credits were extended. So for this year and next year, if you install solar, you'll be able to get 26% of the cost of your array back from your federal tax returns. So that rebate will come at a later period of time. So something to keep in mind there if you're interested in financing the system or just really getting the cost nailed down upfront. You definitely do have to take that into account. But the good news is it is a source for significant savings on your system in terms of your total out-of-pocket costs. Again, those tax credits will be ramping down. They kind of resume their reduction schedule starting in 2023, but the good news is for this year and for next year, they're still at 26%. So this is a source for some significant savings on your solar array. So now that we know some of the incentives that are available, we can do a cost exercise. So I'm going to use a hypothetical 5 kilowatt system. I want to make sure to point out the fact that every system is going to be different. The system is sized specifically to your home's energy needs. The average size array in Dane County is a little under 5 kilowatts. So 5 kilowatts is going to be approximately a 5 kilowatt array, I should say, is going to be a little under $15,000. Again, everyone is going to vary a little bit. You know, if you go for premium panels, it might be actually a little bit more than that. But this is generally a pretty conservative estimate for a 5 kilowatt system. Then assuming you get a focus on energy rebate, that will take $500 off. The federal tax credit removes another $3,600 from that sum, which leaves you with an out-of-pocket cost for that hypothetical 5 kilowatt system at a little over $10,000. Again, every system is going to be different. You know, if you are going to purchase, say, a 10 kilowatt system, it's likely not going to be just a doubling of that price. It might not be quite that much. It might also be more. If you add batteries into that as well, that's definitely going to change the cost too. But this is just to give folks a general idea of what the cost will be, and we also run through that when we call you up and talk with you over the phone. So as you can see, still not free by any stretch of the imagination, but pretty on par with some other home renovation projects. And at this point, since we were talking about financials, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and actually turn it over to Jason from Greenpenny. So Jason, whenever you're ready, you may take it away. And I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Sam, very much. I'm trying to share my screen, Sam, and it's saying that I am disabled from screen sharing, which is fine.
Here we go. I'm going to make you co-host. That should help.
There we go. Perfect. All right. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you again, Sam and Renew Wisconsin. You're a wonderful organization that Greenpenny loves to partner with and work with. And thanks for inviting us to participate today. As Sam was just going over the incentives and the economics of how to purchase solar, you know, a lot of folks, whether you're a resident, a homeowner, or a small business, or a large business, or a nonprofit, or a farm, you know, you may not want to deploy your hard-earned savings or capital to invest in a solar system. So we at Green Penny, our vision is to finance a sustainable tomorrow. We come from Northeast Iowa, a community called Decorah, where we have one of the highest solar energy adoption rates in the country. And that happened because the bank financed a lot of that, but also because we partner with a lot of folks in our community to do something that's really difficult, which is to advance a significant solar adoption rate in our town. And so we were trying to, with Green Penny, spread that to more communities across the Midwest and including in Wisconsin. And because we're about financing a sustainable tomorrow, it means we're trying to make the economics work for our borrowers, meaning that we try to, as much as possible, structure our financing such that our borrowers are trading their current utility payment for a financing payment, so roughly equal to what their cash expenditure is every month for their utilities, for a financing payment. And then once they pay that loan off, they'll enjoy many, many years of a pretty de minimis or small amount of utility charges, usually a hookup fee with the utility that might be $10, $15, $20 or something like that. So that's generally what we try to do. So how do we do that? Well, we have, first of all, we will finance 100% of the solar systems, up to 100% if you need that, or if you want to put money down, of course, you can do that too. Our current rate for FICO or credit scores 720 and above is 4.45% with an automatic payment from a qualifying checking account. Doesn't have to be at Green Penny. We'd love it if it was, but doesn't have to be. And then our other credit tier is FICO scores of 670 to 719, and that rate is 5.45%. And we find that, generally speaking, those rates, and of course our terms only include a $50 loan origination fee. If you've researched financing in this space before, you might have heard of very large financing fees or something called dealer hookup fees. We don't have anything like that. There are financing companies out there that will do things like a year's free of no payments and no interest, but then at the end of that, the rates are pretty high. We don't do any of that. We really want to make sure that we're transparent and clear about our terms. And then again, our borrowers are simply trading a financing payment, or I'm sorry, utility payment for a financing payment in the near term. And then once that loan is paid off, they enjoy many, many years of a pretty de minimis or small amount of utility costs. You can go to greenpenny.com. If you've missed any of this, go to greenpenny.com, and all of our terms and the details of our loans are available on our residential solar financing site. If you're a small business, we also have a commercial financing site you can go to as well on greenpenny.com. The way that we structure this is we can do a couple of different options. As Sam said, there's a federal tax credit. So in order to make the economics work favorably for our borrowers, we will take 26% of the project. So if you're doing a $20,000 install, roughly 5,000 of that, we will set aside and do a single pay loan for up to 15 months. What that means is the borrower, you will not pay a monthly payment on that loan. You'll simply have that loan set aside. And when you get your tax rebate, you'll just pay us back plus a little bit of interest that is accrued up to 15 months after the close. And the rates are the same as I detailed earlier. Then we have a project loan, which is 74% of the project, which we will amortize up to 12 years at, again, the same rates I mentioned earlier. And again, we find that generally speaking allows our borrowers to swap a current utility payment for a financing payment, so there's no extra monthly budget allocated to your solar system. And then hopefully within 12 years, and hopefully even earlier than that, it'll be paid off. And as these panels are warranted up to 25 years, and actually sometimes we're even seeing now where they can go to 30, you'll enjoy many, many years of no or de minimis utility payment. So that's Green Penny. That's our financing. If you have any questions, you want to talk to one of our Green Penny bankers through this, we encourage everybody to call 888-G-PENNY-0 and talk to a banker. They're happy to walk you through everything I just said in more detail, the timing of it, other options I didn't have a chance to discuss. Please call us 888-G-PENNY-0 or go to greenpenny.com for more information. With that, Sam, we'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Jason. It's you explain it so much better than I can, so I really appreciate the explainer there. So thank you so much for that.
You bet.
Jason, hopefully you can stick around too if there are any more questions.
Will do.
At the end of the talk. All right, I'm going to resume mine. So I'm going to skip ahead a few slides because we're running out of time, and I definitely want to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask questions. Hopefully you can all see my slides again. If not, please shout out. We're going to talk about some steps to installing. Before I do that, I do want to point out that we talk about kind of some of the financial sides of things and all that. Typically, most homeowners will pay off their system in about 10 years. That amount of time can certainly move a lot in either direction. If you're a little bit more shaded, as Rick was talking about earlier, that time will definitely increase a bit. If you are not shaded, if you do things like, if you're really savvy with your electric use, and if you move to a time of use rate, you can actually drop that down to about 7 years. So the time that it takes for you to pay off these systems is relatively short, especially when you're talking about, what's the return on investment for windows or for a roof. It definitely is quite a bit more tangible, and we can talk about that a little bit more too. But for now, I just want to kind of shift gears and talk about the steps to installing, because that's really important, and I want to make sure everyone knows how that works here before we kind of run out of time. So the first step you do, most of you probably have already done it, is sign our I'm interested form. That's on the MadiSUN Solar .com page. If you haven't done that, definitely suggest you do that now. We will give you a phone call and we'll discuss things like your electric use. We'll talk certainly about your roof space, your roof shading, things like that. We'll give you some estimates on the size of the system that you'll need and your return on investment time, things like that. And we can also schedule site assessments as well with our solar installers. From that point on, you'll kind of shift gears and you'll interact more with our solar contractors. They will come out and give your home a full assessment. They will give you a proposal as well that will kind of detail not just the things like the types of solar panels that will be used, but also the cost. They will be able to tell you which rebates you'll likely qualify for and things like that. If that proposal looks good, it will turn into a contract. And from that point on, if you are satisfied with the contract, when you sign it, then afterwards your solar array gets installed. The entire process time from sign up to energized and interconnected solar typically takes anywhere from about 4 weeks to sometimes as long as 2 or 3 months, depending on the time of year, depending on a whole slew of other factors as well. Chad and Rick, do you know currently what your wait time is for someone who's, say, just signing up today?
I would say ours is right around 2 months at the moment, probably.
We're a little bit longer than that. I'd say like 10 to 10, 11 weeks.
I guess
Okay.
I should add that's from signing a contract until we start the installation, basically. So the whole process would probably, be closer to 3 months, I guess.
Gotcha. Yep. And I do want to also point out that almost all of that time is spent in the kind of the design and the administration phase. The construction itself typically only takes a day or two at the most. I've had the honor of seeing these guys in action, and it's really impressive with how efficiently they work. So the construction process itself only takes a little bit of time. It's typically designing systems, getting permits, talking with the utility and things like that, that will change around that time frame. So that is the that concludes the presentation essentially. We're going to shift now to the Q&A. I also want to put up here my email and my colleague Justice's email. So I think we did have one question at least come into the Q&A, Justice. Is that correct? Can you tell me if there are more?
Yeah, so we actually had two from Paul, but I think one got answered, and Paul, certainly correct me if I'm wrong. I'll just remind folks as well, you can feel free to use the Q&A or the chat function, and we'll be happy to address them. Paul's question is, do you have to owe sufficient income taxes, i.e. paying in, to take full federal credit amount on your tax return for that year?
So I can take this, but I definitely would invite Jason to weigh in if there's anything I leave out or if there's anything that I get incorrect. So yes, you do have to, of course, pay in enough taxes in order to get those taxes back, right? If you only say pay in $1,000 in federal income taxes, you cannot collect a $2,000 federal ITC. The good news is what you can do is you can collect however much you are entitled to 1 year and then essentially roll the rest over. So if you do, let's say your federal ITC credit, your federal credit is for $2,000 and you only pay in $1,000 each year, you'll be able to collect $1,000 this year and then $1,000 next year as well. That probably will impact a little bit in terms of financing, but maybe Jason, maybe you can answer that question that I just made up on the spot.
Of course, I'm on mute. Yes, so you do want to consult a tax advisor. If you're a homeowner and you're doing this for your residents, then you do need to have what's called the tax appetite in the business to qualify for the refund. By the way, I'm not exactly sure where this stands right now in the infrastructure bill, but there is a thought right now in a proposal to make the income tax credit a direct payment, so you don't have to have the tax appetite, and that will be interesting to follow over the next couple of months. So if you're wondering whether or not you would have that, then you might want to see where the infrastructure bill ends up over the next couple of months. The other thing I will say for businesses, of course, you also will qualify for depreciation typically of the equipment of the panels. And so that's also a meaningful benefit to installing solar as well.
Thanks, Jason. Yes, definitely want to drive home the point of I am not a tax professional. So if there are more in-depth questions, and even if there aren't, you definitely may want to consult one of those before moving ahead fully if you want to completely understand the financial situation in that respect.
Great. We have another question from Carl. I have a tree in my front yard that is fairly young. Are you able to predict how the tree might impact solar production over the years? I think this is probably a good question for the installers.
Yeah, Rick or Chad, do you want to handle that question?
I mean, we can make some predictions based on what type of tree it is and how fast it will potentially grow. And then, we use shade reading tools to determine what the current shading levels are at. So, we can make some predictions on it, but personally, I'm not a botanist. I don't know that much about tree growth rates. So, yeah, to some extent, yes, I guess would be my answer.
Okay.
Rick,
great.
anything to add to that? If you're still there.
Not really. I mean, it depends on the tree. Is it an evergreen versus a deciduous tree? And there is a little bit of art involved in interpreting shading, but I mean, we can sort of generalize. We know that growth patterns of trees and the distance from the house and the current height and things like that. So.
Excellent. More questions?
Yeah, awesome. Another question from Paul. Does the contractor coordinate with the utility?
Yes, but I'm going to let Chad and Rick answer to what extent.
Yes, basically the only thing we need from the customer as far as the utility stuff goes is a few things filled out on the paperwork and some insurance information. Other than that, we take care of everything else. So, but there are a few things we need them to fill out on the application with the utility as the homeowner.
Great. Another question from Eric. Who is our third installation contractor?
Yes, our third installation, or our third solar contractor, excuse me, is Arch Electric. They are based out of Plymouth, Wisconsin, but they have opened up recently. I believe they opened it up early last year, an office here in Madison. So they are our third contractor. So there are multiple options this year. And definitely suggest folks take a look at all three contractors, visit their websites to see which one you are interested in working with.
Great. That's all the questions I'm seeing right now, but folks feel free to, oh, just kidding. Another one from Julie. If I wanted to add battery storage down the road, would this be impractical? And can you do the net metering alongside the battery storage? Example, batteries kept a certain percentage full and then overflows to the grid.
Sorry, you were kind of cutting in and out there, Justice. Could you just kind of ask that again?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I wanted to add battery storage down the road, would this be impractical? And can you do the net metering alongside the battery storage? For example, battery is kept a certain percentage full and then overflows to the grid.
Yeah, so the good thing now about batteries is they can be incorporated into grid-tied systems. I don't know, maybe Chad or Rick wants to speak to this, but as far as I know, battery components can be kind of added in, additionally later on. They're still really expensive. That's the main point I want to make right now. Even, kind of a relatively small battery backup system is going to start at about $10,000. Chad or Rick, can you speak any more to the kind of the net metering side of that? I'm guessing that would probably come into play a little bit more if you were on like a time of use rate. Is that right?
I think it depends on the utility. Alliant Energy has a 20 kilowatt net metering threshold. So they count basically the inverter output as well as the battery size to calculate the kilowatts of your system. So for any significant home backup, it would be pretty easy to get over that 20K, unless you just wanted some sort of minimal critical load backup power. So yeah, you can add it. There's a whole spectrum of complexity involved. One of the Enphase, which is a microinverter company, has a whole line of storage products that are basically compatible with their microinverters. And so it would just be a matter of adding basically what they call a smart switch, which is a transfer switch, and the modular battery units, as well as some other sort of control equipment. But again, like you said, it's very expensive. I'm sort of excited about, Ford is saying that the F-150 pickup will have the ability to be used as a backup power source. And that, I think, has a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack in it, which would be basically would cost you about, would cost more. Solar batteries would cost more than you could buy the pickup for. So, but I think the devil is in the detail of how you'd actually somehow tie that into your home. I'm not really visualizing how that's going to work, but
Yeah, I was actually looking at that truck the other day, and they don't really mention much about that particular aspect of it from what I saw. But definitely an interesting concept.
Rick or Chad, would you guys, our understanding is that you have to have a certain type of inverter that is a battery, that accepts the battery storage. Would you guys recommend that you install that type of inverter if you're thinking about installing storage later, or would you just install a typical inverter and change out the inverter later? What would you guys recommend?
I guess it kind of starts getting complex here. So that would probably be referring more to a DC coupled battery backup system. Whereas there's also AC coupled battery backup systems, which is how the Enphase system works. And in that case, yeah, you wouldn't really need to install anything now for an AC coupled system. There is some efficiency advantages in DC coupling, to my understanding. I don't know, Rick, do you want to add anything to that? Rick might have a little better understanding of the battery system than I do.
It's super messy.
Yeah.
There's not I think that's why I think most installers are sort of suggesting that people wait a little bit. You can add a battery backup to any existing solar system, but in some cases you have to add a whole separate inverter,
right,
batteries, or you can go the hybrid approach, which is problematic on its own. They're very expensive, those inverters, and have some limitations. So it's a can of worms at this point.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this has been some really great discussion. Unfortunately, we are at our time limit, so I want to respect everyone's time. Also, certainly want to thank our co-hosts, our solar installer guests as well. Thank you so much for a really great presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact myself or Justice. We can connect you also with any of the folks that were on the call today as well, if the questions need to be answered by those folks too. So just want to thank everyone once again and tell everyone to have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sam and Justice.